Good evening. My name is Cole. I've been working the night shift at a Walmart in Prescott, Arizona for almost a year now. It's a quiet location, tucked near the edge of town, where the desert wind sometimes whistles through the automatic doors if they don't close properly. Most nights are uneventful. I walk the aisles, check the cameras, drink terrible coffee from the break room machine, and count the minutes until 6 a.m. The fluorescent lights flicker sometimes in the cleaning supplies aisle. There's a freezer door near the deli that never shuts all the way. I've memorized these things. The night brings silence, but it's the kind that settles into your skin, not the peaceful kind. I clock in at exactly 11:58 p.m. Every shift, always a couple minutes early, always with the same mechanical routine. Badge to reader, beep, door clicks, I'm in. Last Thursday started the same way. I parked under the busted parking lot light, checked the building perimeter like I always do, then scanned my badge and entered. The night manager, Sean, nodded from his little glass office but didn't say anything. He rarely does. I settled into my usual rotation, starting with electronics, looping through toys, then groceries, then stockroom. I remember feeling a little off, like I hadn't really woken up even though I'd been up for hours. Around 2:30 a.m., while reviewing the badge access logs on the security terminal, a habit I picked up out of boredom, I noticed something strange. My badge had been scanned twice that night, once at 11:58, which was me, and again at 12:42 a.m., when I was patrolling the home goods section. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was a glitch, maybe someone else used a master badge that showed up under my ID somehow. But the system here is pretty basic. Each badge is tied to a name and position. Mine's unique. I leaned closer to the screen. The access time was logged at the main entrance. I replayed the camera feed. The footage was grainy, and the angle from the front door cam isn't great, but it showed the sliding doors opening, slowly, hesitantly, and then nothing. No one walked in, just empty space, glass parting to let something through that the camera didn't catch. The doors closed again like they always do, sealing the building. I checked again, my badge, my name, my access, but I hadn't left my post. I hadn't even left the housewares aisle during that time window. My first thought was system error, but then I felt it, the kind of quiet that's too thick, like the store was holding its breath. I looked up at the monitors again. Everything looked normal, just aisles, shelves, shadows. But some nights, the silence feels heavier than usual, and that night it felt like something had slipped in when no one was looking. I didn't mention it to Sean. He wouldn't care, and even if he did, he'd just chalk it up to some software hiccup and tell me to reset the system. That's what everyone does here. Explain away the strange things because we don't get paid enough to ask questions. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about it. When I got home that morning, I pulled up the archived footage remotely using the security app we're not technically supposed to access off-site. I scrubbed back to 12:42 a.m. again. Same thing. Sliding doors open, no one visible. Just a dark line on the tile floor like something heavy had passed through, but it wasn't there the second before. It was subtle, and I might have missed it if I hadn't been obsessively staring at that spot. Over the next few nights, I started checking the logs every shift, and it kept happening. Not every night, but enough to make it clear this wasn't just a fluke. My badge was showing up during times I couldn't possibly be at the door. Once at 1:13 a.m., another time at 3:22, and one time on a night I was off, it scanned in at exactly 2:07 a.m. I still have the screenshot from that log. Cole Matthews, security, access granted, but I was home, asleep. The timestamp burned into the corner of my screen felt like it was mocking me. I confronted Sean that week just to see his reaction. He barely looked up from his desk, muttered something about repeating badge IDs and ghost scans, and waved me off. Said it happened sometimes with old hardware, but I checked the firmware. Everything was updated. The readers were clean, and the logs were precise. There were no duplicate badges in the system, just mine. I even checked with corporate. They sent me a list of active access cards. Mine was the only one listed under my name. So who or what was using it? One night, around 2 a.m., I decided to test it. I stood just behind the entrance, right by the sliding doors, watching the reader from a blind angle in the vestibule. I waited there for over an hour, pretending to do rounds whenever Sean looked my way on the monitor. At 2:41, the reader beeped. A green light blinked. My name appeared on the small internal monitor. I stepped out instantly, expecting to see someone. Maybe a prank, a glitch in the matrix, anything. But the vestibule was empty. The doors were just finishing their slide open. Cold air rushed in. It smelled like dust and something else, like copper. I walked out into the lot, scanned the area. Nothing. Just that same flickering streetlight overhead. I walked back inside, but something felt wrong. Like the store was now different somehow, even though nothing had moved. When I got back to the security room, the camera for the third aisle, the cleaning products aisle, was black. Not static, just black. No feed, no error, just absence. And then, as I watched, it flickered once. Just once. A single frame of the aisle, and then nothing. As if the store had blinked. The cleaning supplies aisle, what we call aisle 3, isn't anything special. Bleach, mops, paper towels, pest traps. But for some reason, the camera pointed at that section had started acting differently. I ran a full diagnostics check on the feed that night. No hardware issue, no network problem. It wasn't a technical failure, it was something else. The camera would just go dark at random intervals, for a second or two, then come back online like nothing had happened. But during those blackouts, I'd always feel something. A pressure in the air, like I wasn't alone in the building anymore. I told myself it was paranoia, lack of sleep, too much caffeine. But then I started seeing movement on the edge of that feed when it was working. Just shapes. Something tall moving behind the shelves, faster than a person could walk but without making any noise. I tried following it one night, heading straight into aisle 3 as soon as I saw the flicker. But every time I arrived, the place was empty. Still, silent. Except for one night when I turned the corner and found a mop on the floor. The head was soaked, dripping a pale red liquid onto the linoleum tiles. Not blood, not paint. Something in between. I picked it up and checked the cameras again later. At 2:04 a.m., the moment I entered the aisle, the feed went black. I tried to rewind, but those seconds were missing. No data, like time itself had been cut out. Later that week, I started hearing sounds from that part of the store. Metallic scraping as if something was being dragged. Sometimes whispers, low and stuttering, just beneath the hum of the fluorescent lights. I'd walk through the aisle and find nothing out of place, but the air felt too thick, the light too flat. I started taking notes. Every time the camera blinked, I wrote it down. The pattern wasn't random. It always happened around the same time the phantom badge entry was logged. That's when the idea hit me. Maybe whatever was using my badge wasn't moving through the store like I did. Maybe it only existed in the blind spots. When the camera blinked, when the sensors stuttered, when the silence got too deep. One night I stared at the live feed trying to catch the exact moment it went black. And I did. A single flicker. And in that flicker, just before the feed vanished, I saw it. A shape. My shape. Standing perfectly still in the middle of aisle 3. Same build, same posture, same uniform. But the face, it was turned away from the camera, and the shoulders were slightly hunched, like something was trying to wear my body but didn't quite know how to fit inside it. When the feed returned, the aisle was empty again, but I could still feel it there, watching, waiting for another blink. The radios we use are cheap, old, and only work half the time. There's a static hiss that never really goes away, even when no one's talking. Most nights I keep the volume low, clipped to my belt, just enough to hear if someone from the front needs me. But last Tuesday, just after 3 a.m., I heard my voice come through it. Not someone sounding like me, not a distortion. My voice, clear, calm, saying, "Cole, aisle 3's clean. Proceed to garden center." I stopped cold. I was alone. No one else had access to the security channel. I didn't touch the radio. I just stood there in the center of the apparel section, frozen, trying to remember if I'd spoken recently, if I was hearing a delayed echo. But the words kept playing in my head, like a memory out of order. My voice, but not something I remembered saying. I checked the timestamp on the surveillance terminal. 3:03 a.m. I rewound the radio feed from the recording server. The same message. Aisle 3's clean. Proceed to garden center. It was said once with perfect clarity, and it was undeniably me, but I hadn't said a word that entire hour. I walked slowly toward the garden section, like the message told me to. Not because I believed it, but because I needed to see what was waiting. The motion-activated lights kicked on one by one as I passed each aisle. My steps echoed. Everything felt slower, heavier, as if the store itself was dragging me forward. When I reached the garden center gate, the metal shutters were half closed. They're never closed during my shift. I ducked under and walked into the open area behind the glass greenhouse wall. The plants there were all plastic, fake displays we kept for seasonal sales. But one of them was overturned. A potted fern, smashed on the floor, soil spread out in a dark smear that looked like it had fingers dragged through it. I heard the radio again. This time the voice was lower, rougher. Still mine, but not quite. It said, "Copy that. Moving to break room." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mouth was dry, my throat locked. I turned and ran toward the break room, not because I was following the voice, but because something in me needed to get ahead of it, to see what it was pretending to do before it did it. When I reached the door, it was closed. I opened it slowly. Inside, the lights were off. The vending machine hummed. The TV in the corner flickered with a paused image from the security feed, and in the reflection of the dark screen, I saw myself, standing in the hallway behind me. I spun around. The hall was empty, but the door at the end, the one that leads to the camera servers, was just swinging shut. I ran after it, pushed it open, and found nothing. No one. Just the servers blinking, and a single paper cup of coffee, half full, sitting on my chair. After the break room incident, I stopped trusting anything with my voice on it. I kept the radio off. I disabled the playback server, but the store didn't seem to care. It kept whispering back in ways I couldn't block. Around 3:15 a.m. each night, the pharmacy lights would flicker. Not a power issue, just a subtle pulsing, as if the bulbs were dimming under some weight I couldn't see. I started noticing movement past that section, in the blind angle between the over-the-counter medicine racks and the refrigerated insulin coolers. Shadows, not just brief flickers, but full silhouettes, drifting across the floor like they had no feet, only shape. I set up a secondary camera with a direct line to the hallway behind the pharmacy. I wired it myself. Nothing fancy, just enough to record a full night's feed without going through the store's system. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. For the first few hours, nothing. Then, at exactly 3:16 a.m., a tall shadow crossed the hallway. Not walking, sliding. Its form stretched unnaturally, like the video itself was bending to allow it through. There were no features, no face, just my posture, my build, wearing what I wear. I played it back again and again. At no point did it trigger the motion sensors, but I knew it was there. It always passed the same way, just past the refrigerated meds, just at the edge of visibility. I started changing my route to avoid that section, pretending to inspect the pet supplies or adjust the clearance aisle just to stay away. But the shadows noticed. One night I was doing inventory by the coolers, trying to look busy. I turned and saw the security mirror hanging above the pharmacy door. In it, I caught a glimpse of something standing directly behind me. Not close, but not far enough. I spun around. Nothing. The air behind me felt colder. The hairs on my arm stood up. The mirror above was still vibrating slightly, like it had just been nudged. I told myself it was imagination, but I knew better. That night, as I walked the back aisles alone, I heard soft footsteps in sync with mine. Always one behind, never ahead. I stopped. They stopped. I started again. They followed. Not echo, not acoustics, presence. When I turned the corner past pharmacy, the light above me burst. Just a quiet pop and then darkness. I pulled out my flashlight, swept it around, saw nothing. But when I looked down, there were footprints. Bare feet, slightly larger than mine, pressed into the thin layer of dust that always settles at night. The print stopped where I was standing, like it had been walking with me, step for step, then just stopped. I stood there for a long time, breathing too quietly, listening for a whisper, a scrape, anything. But all I heard was my own blood rushing behind my ears. Whatever was inside the store with me had learned something new. It didn't need the cameras. It didn't need the badge. It was already in my shadow, waiting for me to slow down. The cart bay near the garden entrance had always been a mess, even before things started slipping out of place. Most nights the area is quiet, just rows of nested carts, some of them broken, all of them heavy and metallic and lifeless. But lately, it's been different. The carts started showing up out of formation. One here, one there, facing the wrong direction like someone had been pushing them around slowly during the night. At first, I blamed the janitorial staff, but then I realized they stopped coming in after midnight since the budget cuts. It was just me, and the cameras showed no one entering or leaving that section. I checked the recordings from 4 different nights. Each time, at exactly 2:17 a.m., one cart would move. No sound, just a slow shift, as if nudged by a wind that didn't exist. The worst was last Thursday. I was doing my usual rounds when I passed the cart bay and noticed one cart, just one, was out in the center of the floor. It wasn't facing the exit. It was angled directly toward me. As I got closer, I saw something dangling from the child seat compartment. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew what it was before I even touched it. My badge, the exact one clipped to my belt. Same ID, same wear marks, same bent corner I always meant to fix. I pulled it free with a shaky hand and held it up. It read, "Access granted, 2:17 a.m., in faint residue, as if the digital trace had burned itself into the plastic. But I never took it off. Mine was still on me, still active, still warm. This one was cold, heavier. I tried scanning it at the nearest terminal. The reader buzzed, confused, and then blinked red. Duplicate entry, badge already inside. I dropped it instinctively and stepped back. The cart didn't move, but the air around it felt charged like the moment before a lightning strike. I left it there and walked away, trying to reset my thoughts. But as I turned the corner, I noticed something even worse. On the nearby monitor, one of the smaller ones connected to the older system, there was a frozen frame from a few minutes earlier. It showed me walking toward the cart, but in the frame, I was already holding the badge, and behind me, further down the hallway, another figure was standing completely still. Same shape, same uniform, just a little taller, a little too still. When I looked back into the hallway, there was no one there, but the cart was now back against the wall, empty, badge gone. That night, the sound of carts clanging echoed faintly every few minutes, even though I never saw them move again. It was like something was trying to remember how to be human, how to mimic the pieces of routine that made me feel real, like it had found one small part of my identity and was learning how to push it around the dark. The inventory room sits behind the loading dock, tucked between 2 locked metal doors that haven't been replaced since the early 2000s. It smells like damp cardboard and old rubber, and I always hated going in there alone, especially after the warehouse crew clocked out at 10. That night, I wasn't scheduled to check it, but the motion alert pinged anyway. Storage movement detected, 3:03 a.m. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but the other part, the part that had seen too much to pretend anymore, knew I had to see. I walked back, each step heavier, slower. The hallway was dark, lit only by the red glow of the emergency exit sign. When I opened the inventory room door, it felt heavier than usual. Not jammed, just reluctant, like the air inside didn't want to mix with mine. The lights inside were already on. That was the first wrong detail. They're motion sensitive and usually take a second to respond. This time they were bright, humming, already aware of me. The shelves looked untouched. Rows of cleaning fluid, boxes of seasonal displays, a stack of old mannequins covered in dusty tarps. But in the back corner, something shifted. Just a blur. I moved toward it slowly, and that's when I saw the monitor. A small, portable LCD screen had been wheeled in, one of the old ones from the electronics section we were supposed to throw out months ago. It was turned on, flickering slightly, showing live footage from the security cameras. But the angle was off. It wasn't any feed I recognized. It was pointed directly into the inventory room, from above, like a top-down view that didn't exist in our setup. And in that feed, I could see myself standing exactly where I was, except I wasn't moving. The version of me on the screen was perfectly still, staring straight ahead, arms down, not blinking. I looked up. No camera above. Nothing but ceiling tiles. I looked back at the screen. The version of me was still staring, except now one arm had moved. It was holding something. I leaned closer. It was my badge. Again, only this time it was being held up like an offering. And the figure's face. My face was wrong. The eyes were too wide, the skin too tight. as if someone had drawn a mask of me from memory but didn't get the details right. I reached for the screen. It blinked off. Total black. Behind me, something clattered. I turned and saw a box had fallen from the top shelf. Its contents spilled onto the floor. Plastic hands, mannequin arms bent and lifeless. One of them had a security tag looped around its wrist. My tag. My name. Cole Matthews. It wasn't printed. It was etched into the plastic like it had been carved with something sharp and deliberate. I backed out slowly, never turning my back fully. The room felt wrong, tilted, like I was walking through a dream that had decided to keep going after I woke up. Later, when I checked the logs, there was no motion alert registered, no camera activation, no light trigger, nothing. But I know what I saw. I know what watched me through that impossible screen, and I know it's learning. Faster now, using the pieces of me it's collected, trying to catalog something it doesn't understand, trying to build something it thinks is human. Sean never paid much attention to the night shift. He showed up late most nights, disappeared into his glass office, and only surfaced for inventory reports or when corporate called. But after the inventory room incident, something in his demeanor changed. He started watching me more closely, not in a concerned way, more like he was waiting for me to confirm something he already suspected. I'd catch him staring through the office window, face still, eyes locked on mine like he was trying to measure how far along I was. At first I thought it was just paranoia. The job does that. You work enough lonely nights in fluorescent-lit aisles and your brain starts adding shadows where there aren't any. But then he started avoiding the cameras. Sean used to walk the store once an hour, clipboard in hand, fake smiling at nothing. Now he stayed in the back. Lights off. Office door closed, sometimes locked. One night, after the cart badge incident, I decided to confront him. I waited until the feed showed he was alone in his office, then walked straight in. He didn't flinch, just looked at me. His eyes didn't match his face anymore. The skin around them was tight, like he hadn't blinked in hours. I told him about the badge duplications, the shadows, the surveillance anomalies. I expected him to laugh, to wave it off like always, but he didn't. He just said, "I know." 2 words. Flat. Final. I stood there, unsure how to respond. He turned his monitor toward me. On the screen was a live feed of the break room. Empty. But in the bottom corner, someone was standing. Just a sliver of shoulder visible. I leaned in. It was my uniform, my jacket, the faded patch on the right sleeve I'd torn months ago. I turned to ask what the hell was going on, but Sean was no longer looking at the screen. He was looking at me, or through me. "It always chooses the night guys," he said quietly. "We're the easiest to replace." I stepped back. My mouth was dry, my palms cold. I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer. Just stood up, walked to the filing cabinet, and handed me a folder. Inside were printed access logs from previous years, all night shift, all showing duplicate entries, all with employees who'd left suddenly. No notice, no final paycheck, just gone. One name stood out. Marcus R. I remembered him. Barely. He was the guy before me. Worked for 3 months, then just stopped showing up. Management said he moved. The last badge entry under his name was 2 weeks after his resignation date. I asked Sean if he ever saw it, whatever it was. He looked back at the screen, then said, "Not directly. That's how it works. If you see it, if you confront it, it takes more." I asked him why he didn't tell anyone, why he kept working here. He gave me a strange smile, the kind people wear when they're too tired to lie anymore. It already knows me. It doesn't need me. I'm just here so it doesn't look for someone else. That night, when I passed his office again, the door was open. Lights off, chair empty, the monitor still on, showing the frozen frame of the break room. My jacket still visible, but the hallway reflection now showed 2 figures. The system isn't supposed to restart on its own. Every reboot has to be authorized manually through corporate credentials, 4-digit key, fingerprint scan, 2-step confirmation. But on Tuesday, at exactly 3:16 a.m., and every screen in the security room went black. Just a blink, no warning. Then a static screen with a single line of white text. Reinitializing. Please stand by. I stared at it, waiting for it to pass, expecting some glitch or power surge to explain it away. But the light stayed on. The building didn't flicker. Only the system, like something had crawled into the software and pulled the wires from inside. The screens returned one by one, but the feeds were off. Each camera showed the right location, but the timestamps were wrong, frozen at 3:16, as if time had stopped recording the moment the restart began. The pharmacy feed was stuck on a single frame. No movement, no flicker, just an unmoving image of aisle 4, perfectly still. I stood there staring, and then I saw it. A subtle difference in one of the frames. My figure again. Same posture, standing halfway between two shelves. But this time, my head was tilted slightly upward, staring directly into the camera. My actual self was in the security room. I hadn't moved. I hadn't left the desk. But the image on the screen was breathing. A slow, barely visible rise and fall of the chest. I reached for the manual override switch, tried to kill the feed. Nothing happened. Then every light in the security room dimmed. Not out, just lower, like someone was controlling a dimmer from outside the building. I heard the hum change. The electrical buzz shifted into something else, something deeper, almost rhythmic. A sound that wasn't quite mechanical, wasn't quite alive. I stood and opened the door. The hallway beyond was dark. No overheads, just the weak glow from the exit signs. I walked, flashlight in hand, toward the far end where the third aisle curved into electronics. Every step felt disconnected from time, like I was moving through something that didn't want to be walked through. When I turned the corner, I froze. A small square device sat in the middle of the floor. It was one of the backup servers, unplugged, its cable coiled neatly beside it like someone had laid it down with care. The LED blinked red. I crouched beside it, wiped off the dust. The screen pulsed on. No menu, just a series of numbers. 03, 16, 03, repeating. Then it shifted to 03, 16, 04, 03, 16, 05, slowly climbing. Time, restarted, but only for this device. As if whatever interrupted the system was now restarting something else in its place. I looked around. The store was silent, but the shelves looked different, just slightly off, as if rearranged by memory, not logic. Items in the wrong places. Signs faded. One shelf held 5 of the same photo frame, all showing an empty aisle. No people, no product, just the store looking back at itself. I picked one up. On the back, someone had scratched a single word. Stay. I didn't. I walked back to the security room in silence, but the screens were still wrong. Every feed now showed me walking through the store, simultaneously. Multiple versions, some with jackets, some without. One limping, one holding a flashlight I never owned. And all of them were walking toward the camera. The electronics section always felt cold, even during the day. At night, it became something else entirely. Rows of blank TV screens, silent speakers, aisles of glass and plastic reflecting just enough of yourself to make you doubt what you're seeing. I avoided that area most shifts unless I had to check a shelf tag or restock headphone locks. But after the system restart, the camera-facing electronics started glitching. The feed jumped erratically, as if the frame rate was being choked, skipping entire seconds, then freezing on distorted images, screens full of static, aisles with impossible shadows, my own face too close to the lens in places I never stood. I decided to walk the section just once to confirm nothing physical had changed. But it had. Something about the geometry was wrong. The aisles didn't line up the way I remembered. The clearance bin was further from the register. The tablet shelf was flipped left instead of right. It was like someone had recreated the store from memory, but missed the fine details. In the center of the back wall, there was something new. A mirror. A full-length standing mirror, rectangular with a chrome frame. Except we don't sell anything like that in electronics. I approached it slowly, footsteps dampened by the thin industrial carpet. As I got closer, I realized the mirror wasn't reflecting correctly. My image was delayed by half a second. I moved my hand, and it followed late, twitchy, like a buffering video. I leaned in. My reflection looked like me. Same uniform, same tired face. But the eyes were wrong. They didn't follow perfectly. There was a delay in the blink, just enough to notice. I stepped back. The glass warped slightly at the edges, as if under pressure. A hairline crack stretched from the top left corner to the center like something had pressed against the inside. I reached out and touched the surface. Cold. Not like glass. Like metal left outside in winter. And then the reflection moved without me. Just an inch. My mirrored head tilted to the left. Mine didn't. I froze. Watched. The mirror figure slowly raised one hand, palm forward. Mine stayed still. Then, with a sudden flicker, the reflection shattered. Just the image, not the glass. The mirror now showed the aisle behind me, but it was empty. I turned around instinctively and saw movement at the end of the row. Just a glimpse. A figure turning a corner. I chased it, heart pounding, shoes slipping slightly on the polished tile. But every aisle was empty. Only the flicker of static from one TV still plugged in, showing nothing but snow. When I returned to the mirror, it was gone. No sign it had ever been there. In its place was a blank shelf with a printed tag that read, "Display temporarily unavailable." But when I scanned the tag for the SKU, the product description said, "Active unit in use. Do not remove." That night, every TV on that wall turned on at once. No sound. Just footage of the electronics aisle from a high angle. And in every feed, someone was standing where the mirror had been. Still, watching, face obscured, holding a cracked screen in one hand. The security footage was never supposed to go back more than 90 days. That's what corporate policy says. The servers overwrite old data in cycles, keeping only recent activity to save space. But after the mirror incident, I dug deeper. I accessed the older system, one of the black box backups in the manager's server room that hadn't been touched since before my time. Sean had shown it to me once, almost as a warning. The interface was clunky, frozen in some early 2000s software shell, but it worked. The files weren't deleted. They were hidden, archived under an old employee access protocol labeled alternate logs B-Night. I clicked in. The timestamps didn't make sense. There were files marked with my badge ID on nights I wasn't on shift, nights I was home, sick, or even out of state visiting family. I played one of the clips. It was grainy, lower resolution, but clear enough. The figure in the footage was me. Same posture, same jacket with the frayed sleeve. He was walking the third aisle, sweeping his flashlight slowly side to side, head low like he was muttering something to himself. Then he stopped, turned to face the camera and smiled. I paused the footage, heart pounding. I don't smile like that. Not on shift. Not ever. It was a grin stretched too wide, held too long, as if the muscles didn't understand subtlety. I played other logs, dozens of nights, each one showing me or something wearing me, walking the same loops through the store but in reverse order. Groceries to toys, then electronics, then housewares. Every pattern inverted, every action slightly exaggerated. One video showed the figure crouched in the toy aisle, staring at a stuffed animal for 13 minutes without moving. Another showed him placing something small inside the floor vent in the freezer section, then walking away without ever checking the cameras. I noticed something else. The store looked different in these recordings. Dimmer, more shadows. Some aisles had items we never stocked, an entire row of unmarked black binders, a rack of name tags all blank. In one video, the electronics section had no televisions, just black screens mounted on the wall like empty windows. And every time this other version of me appeared, the timestamp read 3:16 a.m., regardless of when the footage started. Like all those nights existed on the same loop, feeding into each other through a crack in time. I showed the clips to Sean. He watched in silence, jaw clenched. When it ended, he said one thing: "They don't record for us. They record for it." I asked him what he meant, but he just walked out of the room, didn't come back for the rest of the shift. That night, I stayed in the security room, watching both systems side by side. Live feed on the left, archive on the right. At exactly 3:16 a.m., I saw the door to the garden center open in both timelines. Same movement, same pause, but only in the archived feed did someone step through. Me, or the other me. He stood there for a moment, then turned and looked directly into the lens. His eyes were all wrong, reflective, like glass. And behind him, stretching far into the darkness of the lot, dozens of carts were lined up in perfect formation, facing the door, waiting. The security footage was never supposed to go back more than 90 days. That's what corporate policy says. The servers overwrite old data in cycles, keeping only recent activity to save space. But after the mirror incident, I dug deeper. I accessed the older system, one of the black box backups in the manager's server room that hadn't been touched since before my time. Sean had shown it to me once, almost as a warning. The interface was clunky, frozen in some early 2000s software shell, but it worked. The files weren't deleted. They were hidden, archived under an old employee access protocol labeled alternate logs B-Night. I clicked in. The timestamps didn't make sense. There were files marked with my badge ID on nights I wasn't on shift, nights I was home, sick, or even out of state visiting family. I played one of the clips. It was grainy, lower resolution, but clear enough. The figure in the footage was me. Same posture, same jacket with the frayed sleeve. He was walking the third aisle, sweeping his flashlight slowly side to side, head low like he was muttering something to himself. Then he stopped, turned to face the camera, and smiled. I paused the footage, heart pounding. I don't smile like that. Not on shift. Not ever. It was a grin stretched too wide, held too long, as if the muscles didn't understand subtlety. I played other logs, dozens of nights, each one showing me or something wearing me, walking the same loops through the store but in reverse order. Groceries to toys, then electronics, then housewares. Every pattern inverted, every action slightly exaggerated. One video showed the figure crouched in the toy aisle, staring at a stuffed animal for 13 minutes without moving. Another showed him placing something small inside the floor vent in the freezer section, then walking away without ever checking the cameras. I noticed something else. The store looked different in these recordings. Dimmer, more shadows. Some aisles had items we never stocked. An entire row of unmarked black binders. A rack of name tags, all blank. In one video, the electronics section had no televisions, just black screens mounted on the wall like empty windows. And every time this other version of me appeared, the timestamp read 3:16 a.m., regardless of when the footage started. Like all those nights existed on the same loop, feeding into each other through a crack in time. I showed the clips to Sean. He watched in silence, jaw clenched. When it ended, he said one thing: "They don't record for us, they record for it." I asked him what he meant, but he just walked out of the room. Didn't come back for the rest of the shift. That night, I stayed in the security room, watching both systems side by side. Live feed on the left, archive on the right, at exactly 3:16 a.m. And I saw the door to the garden center open in both timelines. Same movement, same pause, but only in the archived feed did someone step through. Me, or the other me. He stood there for a moment, then turned and looked directly into the lens. His eyes were all wrong, reflective, like glass. And behind him, stretching far into the darkness of the lot, dozens of carts were lined up in perfect formation, facing the door, waiting. Some nights I don't move at all. I stay near aisle 8, behind the seasonal display where no cameras are aimed directly. The store hums around me, alive in its own way, indifferent to the idea of human presence. I've learned the rhythm now. The system resets at 3:16 a.m., but not every night, only the ones that matter. On those nights, the store breathes. The lights pulse in patterns too subtle to notice unless you're still enough. I used to count time in seconds. Now I count it in flickers, in footsteps, in shelf alignment. I found places in the store where the geometry folds slightly. A corner near the sporting goods aisle where the floor tiles bend inward. A freezer that always runs too cold, no matter the setting. One of the shelves near the book section displays titles we never stocked. I pulled one once. No barcode, no cover, just my name, repeated across the pages like a prayer, or a file. There's a plastic bin behind housewares labeled "Returns Unmatched." Inside it are dozens of tags, employee badges, all blank, all identical, and one of them has my photo, faded, slightly melted, like it was left too long in heat. I keep expecting someone to notice, a new hire, a district manager, anyone, but no one comes at night. The day shift treats this place like any other store. Lights on, customers, scanning, restocking. But at night, we're alone, and we're not the only ones. Sometimes, in the deepest part of the shift, I hear a cart move from the opposite end of the store. Just one. No squeak, no rattle, just motion, and then a pause, like something is testing the sound. I stopped checking the cameras. They no longer show the store I'm in. They show another place, A shadow Walmart that mimics this one, but reflects something older, something more instinctive. In those feeds, the lights never fully turn on. The shelves are taller, the doors don't open, and the figures walk with a purpose I don't understand. A few nights ago, I saw Sean again, or someone like him, standing at the edge of the pharmacy aisle, watching, not moving, just present. His eyes didn't blink. He had no radio. His badge was melted into his shirt, fused like it had grown there. I called out. He didn't respond. He just lifted one hand slowly, palm up, and pointed toward the back stockroom. Then he faded, not walked away, not disappeared, just faded, like fog pulled into a vent. That same night, my badge flickered briefly. No sound, no warning, just a red light that blinked once, then stopped. Access denied, but I was already inside. The store knows, and it remembers. There's one aisle I can't walk through anymore. It's not listed on the layout, doesn't appear on the maps, but I know it's there. I see it sometimes between toys and automotive, a sliver of space that shouldn't exist, too narrow to be built, too deep to ignore. The signs above it are blank. The shelves carry nothing recognizable, just shapes wrapped in plastic sealed tight, no prices, no labels. I tried to walk through it once. I marked the entry with a floor sign so I'd know where I started. 5 steps in, the lights above buzzed louder, and everything ahead of me went slightly out of focus. Not like a camera blur, more like heat distortion, as if reality itself was pulling away. I took another step, and my flashlight dimmed. Another, and my headset cut out. I turned around expecting to see the store behind me, but it wasn't there. Only more shelves, more dim light, a soft rustling sound like plastic wrapping being handled gently, repeated over and over again. That's when I realized there was no exit. I hadn't gone far, 20 feet at most, but when I walked back the way I thought I came, the path curved. It always curved. Left, then left again, forming a slow spiral around nothing. I started to panic. The radio on my belt turned on by itself. White noise. Then a voice. My voice. Saying my own name like it was a question. "Cole?" I answered. I don't know why. And the voice replied, "Are you still with us?" The floor beneath me changed. I don't know how to explain it. Softer, almost porous. The tiles were replaced with something that absorbed sound, made each step feel like it was underwater. I ran, turned corners, knocked over shelves, but they never fell. They just slid away, rearranged themselves behind me like they were correcting my movements. Then I saw the cart, the same one, alone in the middle of the blur, my badge inside. But this time, it was on the floor, melted into the tile. I bent down to touch it, and the aisle shifted again. The blur collapsed. Shelves snapped into clarity. I was back in toys, everything normal, bright, music playing faintly from overhead speakers. But the badge I'd touched was gone. I checked my belt. Still there. But now it was cracked across the surface. A thin split down the middle like something had tried to tear it open. That night, when I logged into the system, there was a new alert. Unauthorized aisle entry. Employee, undefined. Response logged. And the camera nearest that location had its feed overwritten by static. Just the words, "Section reserved, do not interfere." I didn't sleep that day. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the badge, wondering if the crack was growing. It was. Slowly, like it was breathing. The end caps, the promotional displays at the ends of each aisle, change weekly. It's part of the floor strategy, cycling clearance items to draw attention. But recently, one of them hasn't changed. The one near the back, beside the non-functioning freezer that hums too low, has shown the same setup for 12 nights straight. No one restocks it. No one even passes it during the day. I checked with the morning shift. They say that aisle's marked for remodeling. "We don't touch that one guy told me without looking up. I decided to document it. I took photos. Same setup, same products. Plastic clocks, all identical, showing the time frozen at 3:16, each one ticking. But the hands never moved. I watched one closely for over an hour. The second hand vibrated but never progressed. I tried to take one down. It stuck to the shelf like it was part of it. Not glued, merged, like it had grown there. I looked at the signage above. Blank. No sale information. Just a faded strip of paper that, when tilted under the fluorescent light, revealed faint ink underneath. A phrase I couldn't parse at first. Then I saw it. Restocking in progress. Please wait patiently. I turned back to the clocks. One of them was different now. A crack across the glass, and beneath the hands, a photo. My photo. From my employee file. I hadn't placed it there. I reached forward, but before I could touch it, a soft shuffling sound came from behind the display, like someone shifting their weight. Barefoot on tile. I stepped around, heart pounding. Nothing. Just the end of the aisle. But the floor was wrong. More scuffed than usual, like something had been dragged back and forth. I checked the camera for that area. The feed didn't exist. The system skipped from aisle 12 to aisle 14. No 13. Never had been. But I remembered walking it. I remembered the products. I remembered the freezer hum. I opened the admin panel to assign a manual label to that aisle. The interface glitched. A new entry appeared. End cap unit. Identity display. Active. I tried to delete it. Access denied. I tried to relocate the clocks. Every entry was locked. That night, the clocks on the end cap started ticking audibly. I passed them just before the end of my shift, and all their hands moved at once. They didn't align. Some went backward. Some jittered in place, but they moved. And in the mirrored glass for a second, I saw faces, not mine, not anyone I knew, just versions of the same shape, reflected over and over, all watching me from behind the glass, all waiting for their turn to be placed on the shelf. Closing time doesn't mean anything here anymore. The doors lock, the lights dim, the last customer leaves. But the store doesn't sleep. It shifts, breathes, folds in on itself like a machine that only works when no one is watching. I used to think I could leave. I used to believe that stepping through the entrance meant returning to the world. But now I understand that it's not the door that traps you. It's the rhythm, the repetition, the slow erosion of who you were until you become a function, like shelving, like lighting, like a rolling cart that always ends up in the same place by morning. My shifts no longer start with a clock in. I wake up already inside. There's no ride to work, no locker room, just the hum of refrigeration and the buzz of the overhead lights snapping on as I begin walking the aisles. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of the clock. Always 3:16. Never before, never after. I find myself standing still more often now, staring at end caps, listening for footsteps that never arrive. The radios have been quiet for days, but occasionally I hear a voice I almost remember. "Cole," it says, "you're doing fine." Sean hasn't shown up in weeks. His office light flickers on sometimes, but no one's inside. I think he finally stepped into the reflection. I think he found where the footage loops from the other side. I see my double less often now. Not because it's gone, but because we've stopped overlapping. We've synchronized. There's no reason to mimic what's already routine. I check the inventory now. I file the reports. I manage the blind aisles, the ones that real maps don't show. When the freezer hum grows too low, I adjust the power manually. When a cart shifts itself out of line, I guide it gently back into place. When the mirror appears again, I face it calmly. I've learned not to flinch, not to blink. The badge I wear is smooth now. No photo, no name. Just a thin black surface that pulses faintly when I pass the old entry reader. It no longer beeps. It just recognizes. Sometimes I wonder if anyone notices I'm gone. But then I remember, I never really left. I see my old life only through the reflection of a paused security screen. A memory caught in static, frozen, rewound, filed under employee, active. And somewhere in a room I no longer remember walking into, a file is still open. A log still running, a timer still ticking, counting every second I've been here, because I am still clocked in, and the store never closes.